and also sustaining it as a way to understand the usage of electronic resources. It started out primarily capturing usage from databases and electronic journals, but it has blossomed at this point with Release 4 into a myriad of reports that we now see, which include books, streaming media, platform, gold open access. Counter is now led by Lorraine Estelle, who is also able to bring all the partners to the table and add new ones while working with work being done to capture research data usage, as well in addition to looking at article level delivery. And we will talk about these things as we go through the presentation. Most of you are likely on this call because you work with counter statistics on a regular basis, but please let us know if there are any terms or concepts that you're unfamiliar as we go through the presentation. And you can do that through the chat feature. This presentation will be loaded to the Counter website after the call for others to view asynchronously. Counter Release 5 was published in July, and we're now in the phase where publishers are beginning to implement it. For librarians, the first interaction with Release 5 will most likely be in January 2019, but you might see some providers having this available for you to look at and review as early as this summer. But generally, we're expecting it to be in place for librarians by January 2019.
Hello, everybody. We seem to have temporarily lost Jill. Jill, can you hear us?
I can. Sorry about that.
Good. Okay. All right. We're back on the road. I think we can see a picture of your beautiful little girl there, but we're back to Counter Release 5, unfortunately. Okay. Thank you.
Sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. This release of Counter is intended to be more extensible and provide individual organizations a greater ability to nest usage information into other reporting structures in easier ways than you've been able to do with Release 4 and older releases. Furthermore, some of the more ambiguous elements have been more clearly defined in order to provide greater understanding of what's being used and how the usage is being captured. This is not yesterday's Counter release. With this version, you'll be able to combine and utilize Counter data in a variety of new ways. There are new reporting features, which will be rather spiffy when fully implemented, and most queries can be designed and requested by a simple web form. Previously, there were multiple reports, but in this iteration, you will have a single large data repository for all the data with a nimble interface to help you pull only the data elements you need and want. As electronic resource provision has expanded and grown, the need for it to count different resources and on varying platforms made capture of usage data much more complex and varied. The intent with this design is simplicity to try to get back to the basics of reporting usage with more ease and utility than the multiple report formats that we currently have available in Release 5. release 4, sorry about that. In rethinking reporting for release 5, we have introduced 4 master reports, one for each level in which usage is reported. Librarians will be able to use master reports to customize their analysis to meet their specific reporting needs in a quick and easy fashion. Here is the template for how a master report query will be presented. We will go through and define metric type, data type, and access method. YOP is year of publication, and there will be the ability to pull just the annual summary, as well as to be able to look at usage by months, or to even look at usage of archival content, which is something that we lost for a little bit with release 4, and we're hoping to bring back. While flexibility is great, it does offer challenges when comparability is desired. Therefore, Release 5 goes further to define a series of standard views on the master reports. Standard views address common use cases and are essentially a set of predefined attributes and filters for the corresponding master report. Metric type allows you to find out what is being searched, what is requested, and what is just being looked at or investigated, as well as what is being denied, the limit exceeded. Think of a request as replacing downloads and investigation as being the replacement for views. And this helps delineate what is the difference between a request and what is the difference of a view. Data types are captured to reflect the nature of the material being used. Is it an article, a book, a database, data set, multimedia, so on. Section types helps with measuring specifically book usage by indicating if the unit of content delivered is a chapter or a section or the entire book. This in the past has been somewhat problematic with the Release 4 in that some providers with their BR2 reports were giving us whole book information or usage, whereas others were giving us just chapter level. So this is an ability or attempt to help clarify what is being counted. Access types relate to the access control that was in place when the content was requested. Controlled means that there's a license in place, or there is a payment process that's probably happened. OA Gold means the content that's available as open access because article processing charges were paid. OA Delayed is for content that became open either after an embargo period or through some other means other than article processing charge. And we're still in the process of defining what that will mean and what that definition will be, as well as developing how that will be represented in Release 5. So this is really something that will be a future development that we're working on currently, and is not going to be part of Release 5 when you first see it in January, more than likely. Access method was introduced to track regular usage separate from usage which might occur because of text and data mining, which is what TDM stands for. The later, the text and data mining might result in massive amounts of content being accessed and used and could skew statistics. This is primarily of interest to research institutions as opposed to institutions that are focused mostly on teaching and learning. Generally, it's the researchers who will be doing text and data mining on large scales that could skew usage and usage information. But separating out this activities allows the TDM usage to be measured and kept separate from the regular usage. As noted, year of publication is captured as an attribute to allow more flexibility in reporting than what was offered previously, and allows you to look at specific archival usage separate from usage with the current year. The headers for all reports will be in the exact same format on all the reports that you get after you fill in the master query form and you request data. And the same information would appear via Sushi as well as through doing this manually. There are more rows, but this makes the report clearer and easier to process. A blank row was added before the body of the report to make it easy to add filtering and sorting in both Excel and Google Sheets. The terminology used in the reports is the same across all reports and between the tabular and Sushi versions as well. And the detail of the reports are consistent across all the reports. Title will always show up in the same column for every report. Publisher will also show up in the same column. Where you will see differences in maybe column headings will be whether it's ISSN being reported or ISBN being reported. So the labels will be consistent in a way that we weren't able to necessarily do previously in Release 4. The other thing that we have changed is with Release 5, there will be a counter Sushi mechanism as opposed to the Sushi that's currently in place and Sushi Lite. This version of Sushi will adopt what's called RESTful, a way of providing an interoperability between computer systems and interfaces that return JavaScript object notation formatted usage. JSON is an open standard file format that uses human readable text to transmit data objects, in this case consisting of attribute value pairs and array data types. This is in line with modern web development, and it uses approaches that are familiar to many web developers. It's offered as a microservice approach, and it will allow that counter usage can now be embedded into other applications more readily, like Tableau and other services you might be using to capture usage data at your institution. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Marie.
Thanks, Jill. Can you still be the slide advancer, please?
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So now we'd like to turn our attention to how you'll likely actually use this thing. We'll talk through how to think about the new release in relation to the old release. Oh, and spoiler alert, the new is easier to use than the old. Look at this. It's everyone's favorite counter report, the journal report. So with this new release, we're helping you go faster by creating kind of standard reports that have preset filters and configuration options designed to meet your standard reporting needs. So the one for journals is for usage of licensed content. So with this new release, now you don't need to also pull the gold open access report and subtract it from the figures you got in the JR1 report to get accurate figures. This is nice, right? Okay, hold on, it gets better. So you know how some providers with Release 4 only gave Book Report 1 reports and others only gave Book Report 2 reports? And what exactly were you supposed to do with that in your annual statistics report? So now all providers will give this one report. You can still drill down to see how many chapters or sections were accessed within a book, but now you can confidently fill in that cell on your annual statistics spreadsheet. So this, this part is important because you'll be able to look to see how much use is occurring on backfiles readily and have the ability to pull multiple year reports to compare more easily than in the past. Providers and publishers will be asked to make all years of content available for usage investigation with this release, and it's one of the reasons why we've given them a full year to implement prior to librarians being able to use it. And Jill and I think this is also super cool. With this new release, we'll now be able to delineate the difference in usage between something from an abstract and index resource from those offering full text. You'll get more meaningful results. And with this new release, you can wave goodbye to result clicks. In addition, if your institutional repository is counter compliant, this report will help in obtaining usage of article level data. This report isn't mandatory at this time for publishers and providers, but it's hoped that in the future this report can be made available from all providers. So we wanted to show it to you here to show that the counter standard is continuing to grow and respond to new sources of usage. The new release will not require that providers include zero-use titles. Counter is endorsing the work being undertaken by the NISO Knowledge Bases and Related Tools Automation Working Group, also known as KBART. And that group is charged with coming up with an approach to support automatic retrieval of your library's entitlements. And we're hoping for some community-supported tools to be developed to help merge and sort these kind of files to get you an accurate accounting of what you're subscribing to that is not getting used. Right, okay, if you're a consortium director, there's a tool being developed especially for you to help you gather any kind of counter report. Counter recently closed a request for proposals with the expectation that the tool will be ready in time for the new release. Okay, so let's talk timelines. And this is also a good time to remind you of the power that's in your hands. So right now, providers are implementing Release 5. Starting in January of 2019, librarians will have these reports available to them, and you may see some rolled out earlier than that. As customers, libraries have a lot to say about content provider compliance to Counter. You have the power to demand Counter compliance and to thank the providers that are already compliant. If you are negotiating new license agreements between now and January 2019, you might consider inserting a clause in that license agreement to ensure that the providers you do business with are Counter compliant. What you're looking at on the screen are the covers of friendly guides These friendly guides to Counter are tremendously popular and are a very easy read. You can go to the Project Counter website, which is shown on the screen at the bottom, if you'd like to download the one that's relevant to you. They're designed to guide you through the new release of the standard. So you can find the best overview comparison, kind of a mapping between Release 4 and Release 5 in Section 9 of the Release 5 Friendly Guide for Librarians. And that guide will talk you through, or that section of the guide will talk you through if you used to gather this kind of report in Release 4, what kind of report do you need to gather now in Release 5? Okay, one more thing to mention. Members of Project Counter have been working with the DataCite folks to develop a standard to track usage of research data. The preprint of the initial code of practice is currently available from PeerJ for review and feedback, and the URL to access that is shown on the screen. So as we get closer to January 2019, you may begin to have questions like, right, I get that this is changing, but what does that mean for me and my annual statistics reporting? You may have questions about how to interpret a statistic you're asked to report on using the new release of the standard. The good news is you're not alone in this. We're right here with you. Jill and I are both librarians, and we'll both be going through this right alongside you. We encourage you to take a look at the USIS website. It's a community site for those interested in usage statistics. So there you'll find like-minded individuals who are kind of traveling on the same path that you are. So we'll be holding more presentations like this that will be recorded and posted to the Counter website after the event for asynchronous viewing. As volunteers within your community, we're interested in making sure you're able to confidently gather and interpret your institution's usage statistics. If we can be helpful along the way, do let us know. And with that, I'll turn it over to you now for any questions or comments that you might have. We're using, it looks like, the chat box to enter any questions that you might have. So with that, we'll pause and let you type if you have anything to ask.
While we're waiting for the questions to be put into the textbook, or text box, not the textbook, just to confirm that there are the standard views on the title report. So there's a question about the book accesses. So TRB1 will be all your book requests in one report, excluding any open access gold books, and TRB2 will be book accesses denied. So that will be there. But we're getting some more questions in, which I'm going to hand back to Marie and to Jill to answer. So the first question is, will Counter 4 data be available after January 2019?
And I think the answer to that question is yes. It will be available in the Release 5 structure. Is that correct, Lorraine? You'll be able to gather that data through the Release 5 portals.
That's absolutely correct. So the way that it will work is that there will be your providers have a number of different ways in which they can create trend data for you, so you can compare like with like, depending on how their systems are set up. but you will be able to compare. Once we get to January, you will be able to do those comparisons. And also, if you have a look at the Code of Practice, I think from memory it's section 13, we're going to check. There's a really useful section which sort of explains how things map from release 4 to release 5 as well. So that's quite a useful thing to have a look at.
We've had another question here from Kristen about the consortial tool and how will it work. The consortial reports are not part of the release 5 that are released for librarians. You'll be able to get at that data through a special tool that's being built. If you're a consortial director, you'll have the access credentials for your member institutions and will be able to gather the data through that tool. So more information about that will be forthcoming as the tool is developed.
And then Anna asked, some providers only provide historic usage reports for a few years. Will that change with Release 5? With adding the year of publication information to Release 5, we are hoping that publishers and providers will no longer feel limited in what they can provide with Release 5. We're hoping that this will help open up and be able to allow for librarians to pull either multi-year usage information or else to be able to drill down to specific year ranges. Again, this is one of the reasons why we are giving providers and publishers a year to implement, because we understand this might be something new and a bit harder for them to work on their end in order to make available. But the goal of Release 5 is to allow you to pull the data you need from whatever year you might need it.
We've had a question about how the JR1 report will handle HTML and PDF full text downloads. And I think this is one of the strengths of Release 5. With Release 5, the metric type that you'll be looking at is called a unique item requests. And this means that if during a user session, the user accesses both the HTML and PDF versions of an article, that content item only gets credit for one unique item request. So if you look at both versions, you're really only looking at one article. But we know that some of you want to count both accesses, and so we have another one that's called total item requests. So if you're at a journal article and you look at both the HTML and PDF version, that will record as one unique item request, but two total item requests. These are good questions you're all asking.
Yeah, and I think, Marie, it's really worth adding as well that this is going to be such an improvement because it gets over that interface effect that has been a problem with different publisher interfaces taking, what can I say, users via different routes, which has sometimes skewed things in the past.
And to reply to Anna on being able to look at usage that occurred from 4 years ago. My initial response is I think you'll be able to look at what the current usage is of content from 4 years ago, but not that you would be able to do the historic gathering of that with Release 5. But Lorraine, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, Jim, not wrong.
It's just not possible to backload usage data from previous years in that way. In regards to the institutional repositories, being able to report with Release 5, this is something that is coming out of a partnership primarily working with JISC in the UK with some of the mechanisms they've developed for reporting repository usage. It will be new with Release 5. It's not something that was previously available, and it's the article level usage that we're talking about. That also is something that I believe is still in development and working on. So it's hoped to be rolled out, but not every repository platform is going to be able to do that, probably starting in January 2019. It is hoped most will be able to, but it will depend on that repository host as to whether they become counter compliant at that point or not.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Jill. And if there are repositories who are interested in what we're calling at the moment conformance to the Release 5 standard, yeah, do get in contact with me, and we have a lot of experienced people who have already implemented Release 4 for their institutional repository and are working on Release 5 for their institutional repository. And I think there's a great deal of value in that, really, because they are using the standard, really, which is very trusted. So if you are interested in more information, yeah, just drop me a line. It's Lorraine here, and I will be happy to help you with that.
So sometimes it's easier to read than listen to a webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and paste into the chat box the DOI of an article that I particularly like, written by our colleague Oliver Pesch. It's called Counter Release 5, What's New and What It Means to Libraries. I'll post in further citation information here now, just in case you want to read more after the webinar.
While you're doing that, I am multitasking here. I'm also just getting the link, which I'm going to paste in, to the sample reports. We don't have a lot at the moment because, of course, all the publishers are still working on the implementation. But we do have some that we have made ourselves, which I'll post the link to. Here we are.
Great, and what Lorraine has just posted there is open access, no paywall. So we've got your backs.
Hey, Marie.
Yeah.
I have an idea. Can we get Oliver to perhaps post the preprint of that article into the LISA preprint archive?
Ooh, I'll email him. Yeah.
So that people can gain access to it, because there is no embargo with doing a green deposit in Serials Librarian, or there shouldn't.
I'll shoot him an email and ask him.
And how could you resist? There's another question here from Anna. Hello, Anna. I'm so glad you're here, and I didn't mess up the time as I thought I had done earlier today. Anna says, so will we still need to gather and store data locally if we want to go? Oh, we've answered that, haven't we? Did we answer? Yeah, we answered. Sorry, I beg your pardon. Oh, sorry, I'm having a little blip here.
So I had an interesting conversation with one of our vendor reps this past week about the new release of Counter, and They asked me how they could help us prepare for the new release as a librarian, how they could help a librarian prepare. And I was so delighted to hear that question. So as the release nears, as January 2019 nears, I would fully expect to be hearing from your vendors and publishers about this with some tutorials about how to use the resource in their system, because it's likely that each provider will implement the portal to the statistics a little bit differently. They might use different formats or have different looks. So what I asked the vendor for was step-by-step instructions for how to get at the reports, as well as maybe a mini video that they could send us through email showing us how to actually get at the statistics on their websites. So I know for most of us this won't be a big deal. The method of access won't be that different than it was before. But sometimes we delegate the collection of these kind of reports to people who may not be as familiar. So step-by-step instructions and many video tutorials might be of use. So be prepared if your vendors or publishers ask you how to help. Be thinking about what you might say to them.
And I would also recommend having them work with the ILS providers to ensure that with the new sushi protocol, that they are able to do ingest at the time that the data goes live in early 2019. I do know that that's, if you're using a third-party entity to help collect and to gather usage data and using sushi already, it would be good to speak to your representative for that third-party provider to make sure that they are on track to be able to ingest that information in a timely fashion. So you don't have to wait to do statistical reporting because the platform isn't ready to make the switch or change over.
Mm-hmm. That's a great suggestion.
I would also just add as well to Marie's comment about the really great provider, it sounds to me, who asked you, how they can help. When I was at an exhibition recently where there were a lot of publishers on their various stands, quite a few said that they were going to be the first to implement Release 5. So for some of them, there is a bit of a competitive race on, which is good to hear. In the presentation, we showed you the mock-up of that interface that would go over the master reports, where you will be able to filter down on the information that you want. Now that was one that we mocked up, but I'm beginning to see some very nice ones being made in real life. So I think there's some really great work being done out there to implement Release 5 very, very well.
Do we have any further questions?
Jill, I think maybe we've done our job. I think we've answered all the questions that people have for now, which is great.
In which case, I believe we want to thank you for joining us. And feel free to email or contact either Eustace or Lorraine, or either one, or Marie or I, and we would be happy to answer any further questions that might arise or come up.
Absolutely, and thank you to our presenters. Thank you so much, Jo and Marie, for doing such a great job.
And just one last reminder, we will be posting this presentation to the Counter website.